How do you get a best possible relationship with somebody? A relationship that is safe, a relationship that is vital, and a relationship that is repairable. And like I say, there's a bell curve in all your relationships. Some are going to be amazing. Some are going to be pretty unpleasant. And then there's going to be some in the middle. And the idea is to go, those ones that aren't that great, how do you make them bearable? How do you make them workable? How do you take a bad relationship and make it acceptable? The ones that are in the middle, how do you go from it being good enough to having some sparkle, having some magic? And the ones that are already great, how do you keep them great for longer? And I can tell you what I think the key tactic around this is. It is about having a keystone conversation. What's a keystone conversation? It is a conversation about how we work together rather than a conversation about what we're working on. And if you're going to take one idea from this talk from me today, it's have a conversation about how you work together before or different from the conversation about what you're working on. And that is hard and that is rare because the work always feels like it should be talked about. It's loud, it's bright, it's shiny, it's urgent. You know, some of you will know my book, The Coaching Habit. One of the first questions on that is, what's the real challenge here for you? It is a question about the work. But I think we should be taking a beat to say, okay, let's have a keystone conversation. Now, I'll tell you why it's called a keystone conversation. There's a metaphor that most of you have already got, which is, it's that lump of stone in the middle of the arch. The two sides of the arch come together. The stone sets it, makes it stable, makes it solid, makes it strong. It gets stronger over time as the weight bears down. It's a really great metaphor for two sides coming together and getting better for it. But as I was doing the research for this, I found that they'd taken this idea of a keystone from architecture and moved it into the world of ecology and biology. And they talk about a keystone species. And the best story I've got for you about that is when they reintroduced wolves into Yellowstone National Park in the US. So they'd hunted the wolves to extinction there. And what happened is that the elks became the alpha creature in the park. And they were kind of stripping the park bare. They were eating all the trees, eating all the leaves, they eating all the grass. That meant there weren't that many birds, there weren't many fish in the river. Everything was a bit kind of worn out. When they introduced the wolves back, they started eating the elk. The elk retreated, so there were few of them around. There were just few of them because they were lunch for wolves. That meant more trees, that meant more birds, that meant the rivers were healthier, more fish, more beavers. The whole system became more resilient, more vibrant, stress resistant from having these keystone species. So whether you're a buildings person or an outdoors person, you can pick the metaphor that works best for you, but the keystone is about helping systems bear stress and flourish and grow stronger over time. So what's a keystone conversation? Well, I think there are 5 key questions for a keystone conversation, and you've got the book, so you'll know what they are when you read the book. I'm going to tease you with the headlines. The first one is called the amplify question. You're like, what is the amplify question? I'm going to tell you in a minute. The second question is the steady question. The third and the fourth question kind of pair up nicely. They're called the good date and the bad date question. And then the fifth question is the repair question. Now, I will give you those specific questions towards the end of this session, because what I want you to do is to dig into one of those questions, go a little deeper into one of those questions. And we're going to pick the first of them, the amplify question. Because a keystone conversation has kind of 3 parts to it. The first part is preparation. Actually stopping and thinking and going, what are my answers to these questions? You'll have immediate answers, but giving a bit of time will deepen a sense of self-awareness and clarity and nuance about how you choose to answer it. Then there's running the keystone conversation itself, and all of this is in the book. And then there's a process of maintenance. How do you keep the relationship going once you've had that initial keystone conversation? So what we're going to do is we're going to take the first question, the amplify question, and we're going to do a little bit of preparation. So you've got some words and language around that. So the amplify question is, what's your best? What's your best? And I came up with that question because I was like, I need something that kind of nods to positive psychology and inquiry and kind of brings out the focus on kind of what's working and what's great. But I didn't want to say, what are you good at? Because that is boring, and it's also tactical, and it's also about competence rather than what gets you excited. And I didn't want to ask, what are your strengths, kind of like strength finder way, because I'm like, I've seen people's 5 strengths, and I'm like, that's great, but I never know what to do with that once I've seen that there are this or that or the other. And I didn't want to really ask what their values were. I mean, I'm interested in that, but again, I don't know how to make that real. So the essence of what's your best is what makes you shine, what makes you flow. So where I want you to go with this, I want you to be thinking about when you think of the work that you've done, and those moments where you're like, this is when I really showed up. This is where I was in that moment. This is where you got to see the best of who I am. Where did you shine? Where did you flow?